Hello, this is Pastor Deborah, and we're beginning another part of the Big Blue Book of the Kingdom of Darkness. We just finished sort of our introduction, part 1, that had many episodes in it. It's sort of like a chapter 1. And I want to now come and bring you a new part of your spiritual education to help you understand Satan's philosophy, his goals, his purposes for the kingdom of darkness here in the second heaven that surrounds the earth and probably out in outer space and here on earth itself. And I'm going to call this Spiritual Babylon. Spiritual teaching of an ancient kingdom that will help you understand a lot that you don't know, that's not taught in church or taught in Bible studies. But I had to learn it when I got thrown into helping multi-generational Satanists, witches, warlocks, the spiritual international Illuminati, hardcore gangs, heavy metal music, voodoo, all kinds of mystics, all kinds of gods on earth throughout humanity. I had to do a deep study of Satan, the spiritual adversary of God, and his kingdom here on earth. So guess what? I had to study history. And here in this new series of the Kingdom of Darkness, which will pick up in the other part of the book and continue on in the Kingdom of Darkness and learning more, but this part, sort of a new part, we're going to call it Spiritual Babylon. And this is going to be episode number 1. And I'm going to take you through history, and I'm going to take you through some other wonderful things that I learned, that I had to know so I knew how to pray. What was I fighting against? You will have to learn about me. I come from a military background, Air Force and Navy. I studied World War II, World War I, all the ancient wars of civilizations. And I had to learn about being a soldier. I had to learn that you have to study your enemy. You have to know them very well. I'm one who can go behind enemy lines spiritually and accomplish great things and get slaves out and get restoration to a land spiritually. So here in this new series, we'll work through this, and then we'll get back to the Big Blue Book of the Kingdom of Darkness. And so here in Spiritual Babylon, we're going to begin with the history of Babylon. All right. My prayer for you is that your ears will hear, your mind will understand, and your spirit will be enlightened by truth, by study. So you listen and you learn. All right? The history of Babylon. It was an empire. It was a city. An Old Testament city out of the Bible, and an empire. And it produced many things. 1, it produced religious concepts. 2, customs. Culture. 4, tradition. It was an ancient pattern of a long-forgotten kingdom pattern that humanity only had bits and pieces of. Sort of like Neo in the Matrix, being fed bits and pieces of a shadow that you didn't really know if it was true or not. But the soul of us, humanity, was trying to bring a spiritual pattern out through our soul, and we didn't have all the truth. So we ended up with Spiritual Babylon. Babylon created other empires and cities. and was even spiritually exists today. That's right. In nations, in governments, in customs, religions, culture, traditions, as the governmental system of a nation, maybe a little city, maybe just a business, maybe a hospital corporation, maybe a local politics group, maybe even in a community volunteer organization. The pattern is there if you look. And where did all this begin? I'm going to take you back in the Authorized King James Bible, back to Genesis 11:2. After the earth's great flood, now everybody in history, all civilizations has a story about a great flood that killed everybody except 8 people who survived on an ark, a boat. This story is through all generations, all history, all religions, all culture and traditions. The man who was the head of that family, Noah, and his wife were instructed by a God they never saw to build the ark because he was going to destroy all things, because both the land, the animals, and humanity had all become too evil and wicked. And he was going to destroy them. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and each one had a wife. They and animals, 2 by 2, a male and a female, came into the ark. So when the flood was over, God could start over again and reproduce, rebirth, sort of, repopulate the earth. A lot of stories about this time in humanity's history. And it came to pass. This is what it says in Genesis 11:2, after the flood, and after they came out of the ark when the flood was over. And it came to pass, as they, the children of Noah, and their descendants, probably millions and millions of them, we don't know, as they journeyed or they traveled from the east, that they found a plain, probably a flat place, off of the mountain where they had settled, that they called the land of Shinar. They must have had to name it themselves. And they dwelt there, they stayed, and they stopped there. And they began to build them a city. Babylon was begun. The land and the people became known as Babylonia, or later to be called Mesopotamia, located on the Euphrates River. Do you know I had to go back in order to understand the Bible, other cultures, traditions, history, what in the world is going on here on the planet? I had to study ancient history. I had to study words. So you must become a student. You must love history. You must look not only at your family, your culture, your traditions, your religion, but others. And see where we all came from. Everybody's got the flood story. Every religion, culture, everybody. Okay? So we begin there. So now the flood's over. Noah's kids. There's some things I got to teach about the Noah's kids. That before they spread out about a curse that came from Grandpa Noah to his grandkids. To one of them, Cain. But right now we're just studying spiritual Babylon. The word Babel, where the word Babylonia came from, and Babylon, means number 1, confusion. Number 2, Baal, B-A-L-A-L, means to overflow with oil, to mix, to anoint, to mingle itself. Babylonian, was a city devoted to materialism and sensual pleasure, marked by luxury, extravagance, or the pursuit of sensual pleasure, the delights of the city. I see this a lot now here on earth. You could have a land trying to be the first on everything. Beautiful buildings, destination place, holiday place, where you can have pleasures and wonderful holidays, great place for business. And through their culture and tradition of their family, maybe their religion, they can go after sexual pleasures. But some of it's hidden. Some of it, they have to have lots of marriages. Keep it quiet under the covers, so to speak. And yet they produce great things. Beautiful cities. Is that a spiritual Babylon? Yes. And it's in every nation. It's in every city. The city, Babylon, spiritually, in the Bible, but also this is a natural example, was ruled by a great hunter of men. What does that mean? I want you to come here to my city. I want you to be my slave. I want you to work for me as a slave. I want you to work for me and bow down to me. Could mean that. Could mean I want to kill you. I want to exploit you. I want you as a slave. Could be. And a great hunter of wild animals. And this ruler of these cities called Babylon, spiritual Babylon, modern day cities that we have right now on the earth, they're all over the world, in every nation, every part of the world. The rulers, might call them politicians, kings, royal family, emperors, don't know. They would receive great worship, praise and glory and thanksgiving for their protection, for their ideas. Do you have anybody like that in your nation? Out of the many would come one, maybe one family, one tribe, one group, one political party, one person that could do this. And who was it in ancient history? Nimrod. Nimrod became a mighty hunter of wild beasts and even of other humans. Did you know humans have been used like animals in a hunt? Just saw that in the Chinese. The richest kids and the lords and the rulers, they would take slaves. And they would turn them loose and you would shoot them like a wild animal. How about the Romans in the Roman Colosseum capturing slaves and use them in the Colosseum for fun? It's all the same. What about if you use slaves to build your city? Can you abuse them any way you want to? Can you take their passports and keep them from leaving? What about children? Men, and even women, have become mighty hunters of children for trafficking, sex, sacrifice, and of women to sexually use them any way they want to. Sometimes you do it through legitimate marriage. Sometimes you do it just for sexual pleasures. Nothing's changed. Humanity is a mighty hunter. Where did Nimrod come from? He came out from Noah. One of Noah's descendants' name was Cush. C-U-S-H. He begot Nimrod. And that's in Genesis 10, 8 and 9. It is believed that Cush created a new way of protecting a new means of protection. Instead of always fighting the wild animals to protect the people, so he designed and created a new way. He organized people into cities and surrounded them with walls of protection. Then organized them, the people, and the new cities into a kingdom, a territory, where a king rules, or an emperor. This is over a dominion, a land, a territory. And Nimrod did just this. It tells us in Genesis, and the beginning of his kingdom, Nimrod, was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, I'm sure I'm not saying it, in the land of Shinar. This is a physical image, a likeness of the fallen cherubims, Satan, and his attempt from the spiritual realm to have a physical representation, an image and likeness of the kingdom of heaven's kingdom and its rulership that they had been a part of. Over a land, over people, over territories. And it had walls of protection for the people. Spiritual Babylon was beginning to take form in humanity's mind and heart. And it was to do and to look like the kingdom of heaven. Satan had become the spiritual adversary of God. He went from being Lucifer, the son of the first age, the son of the morning, a beautiful creature, to being one of nothing but fire and greed and lust, because he wanted something that was not his, the kingdom of heaven with all of its glory. That was reserved for a creature called humanity. And so his heart became lifted up in pride. And he destroyed himself. He was cast down to the earth. But he said, I'm going to have what I wanted. I'm going to have it down here. So he started building through humanity's soul that now was alive and darkened. And he would have his spiritual kingdom played out in the natural, so he could feel like he was the king of a kingdom. So Satan went to work after the flood through the descendants of Noah and his wife and his 3 children of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. What I learned in my studies is that Shem, who became the physical descendant through the blood of Christ Jesus, they went west towards China. Ham and Cain went south into, Arabia, Egypt, Iran now, and Japheth went towards Europe, towards Russia. That's what I learned. So Satan began his spiritual Babylon, and it began taking form in humanity's mind and heart. And it was to be an example of the spiritual kingdom of heaven, but with a twist. It was to be lust-filled, prideful, glorious, radiant, greedy, and willing to kill to keep it. Willing to enslave family members and women and children. Willing to kill so that the ruler could stay in place and have the glory and all the attributes of being the king. And humanity began taking form. Governments, empires became into play. And humanity began forming a kingdom on earth, in the natural, in their own hearts, and with their spirit. But humanity was not to stop and just build a walled city for itself, Babylon, but they wanted to spread, because that's what kings do, out over the whole earth to represent it after the flood. That's what kingdoms do. They advance. They take new territory, new lands, new minerals. They spread their culture, traditions, religion. What was beginning to happen on earth was that Satan's heart and his desires were being reflected through darkened human spirits and darkened human hearts, our soulish mind, to bring about a king of Satan's image and likeness, representing him as the spiritual father, the offspring, the source. Satan, the adversary, spiritually, of God. Satan was beginning to build, used humanity to become an architect. Many of them had dreams. Early on, people would have dreams or visions, and then they'd come up and start building, maybe out in the desert, maybe just in rocks. And they'd say they had a dream about this. Their ancestors came to them and talked to them. Even the name Nimrod comes from the Jewish word Marad, M-A-R-A-D, meaning he rebelled. Remember, the people were to spread out over the whole earth. That's what God wanted, like all the animals. And they didn't do it. They stopped in the plain of Shinar and began to build a city, Babylon. Nimrod was labeled, or so said, to be a mighty hunter before the Lord. Nimrod did things before, in front of the Lord, right under his nose, things that were considered rebellious, and made the people to also rebel before the Lord. And I want to stop right here in this episode number 1 of Spiritual Babylon, the beginning from our history study. So you come back to hear episode number 2. This is Pastor Deborah. We're in the Kingdom of Darkness here on the Hidden Kingdoms channel. And this will go into a podcast form, audio, also in the podcast section here on the Hidden Kingdoms channel. You need to study, you need to learn and understand yourself, nature, politics, governments, culture, tradition, religion, our history, and why the world is in such a mess. All right, I'll see you then. Bye-bye.